I'm preaching today from House of Hope Presbyterian Church on Summit Avenue in St. Paul, Minnesota. This is one of my favorite places to worship. Matter of fact, when I was on sabbatical, Peggy and I worshiped here for almost a year. I love the architecture of this building. I love the architecture of the sanctuary. It is bold, grand, and beautiful. You feel like you've walked into a sacred space just the moment you enter it. The architecture itself of the place inspires awe. The music here is absolutely spectacular. The acoustics enhance every single musical offering. The sound just bounces off these grand stone walls and filters down into the hallways, into every little crevice in this massive structure. When you worship here, few people leave after the benediction. Organist Aaron David Miller plays this amazing postlude on this big, massive organ. And I know it's a performance, but to me, it's so much more than a performance. It is like this glorious and beautiful amen to the end of a morning worship service. Inside this sanctuary, they have a vaulted pulpit. During worship, the pastor will leave the altar area, take some stairs behind a wall, and then all of a sudden appear in this pulpit. It's magical when you're watching it. It's hard to see the preacher is one with the people when they're preaching from way up there, speaking from such a prominent place in such a grand sanctuary. The voice of the preacher commands authority, an authority which transcends the preacher's personality or their approach to ministry. Just so you know, vaulted pulpits were included in sanctuaries like this one simply so people could see the preacher. It has nothing to do with the preacher being full of themselves. Still, if you're watching the preacher preach, it would be hard not to think they enjoy such a place of prominence. When I was in seminary, our chapel was a mini version of this chapel. No, it was not copied after each other. It was just that it was stone and stained glass window and an elevated pulpit, the base of which stood about 5 feet off the ground. The only difference was that chapel was a very, very small room. The big moment of your senior year at seminary is the day you get to preach in chapel. And the day I preached, the professor in charge of the experience demanded that I preach from the pulpit. Now, he was 5'3" and needed the elevation. At 6'5", the vaulted pulpit only drew more attention to my physical size. Have you ever felt uncomfortable when somebody stood too close to you when they talked, or hovered over the top of you while they talked to you? This is how the congregation felt when I entered that pulpit, and I could see their discomfort in their faces. It was like the jolly green giant had been invited into the sacred space to speak. So I did what I always do. I met discomfort with humor. I opened my sermon with, "Hey, can everybody see me? And if you can't, maybe you want to move before I start." That experience taught me something about myself. I don't like being the center of attention. I don't like having all eyes on me. At the same time, I'm also acutely aware of how my physical presence impacts those around me. Sometimes I physically intimidate people just by being present in a room. Later in my senior year, during my final approval interview, a member of my candidacy committee shared with me some insights. He had been with me all along from the first moment I decided to enter seminary. And he said to me, he goes, "Eric, you know, when I first met you, I thought you were the most narcissistic human being I ever met." I wanted to start singing, "You lift me up." But he said, "I thought you were the most narcissistic human being I ever met in my life. But the longer I've gotten to know you, not only is that not true, but it's the exact opposite. You really need to be able to change that." Well, he was right. My entire life, I've had to battle people's perception of me, a perception I don't often get to determine. Listen, I am a 6'5", hyperactive extrovert with a certain level of charisma. I love to laugh, and when I laugh really, really loud. So when I walk into a room, my presence tends to dominate that room. All eyes are on me, whether I want them to be or not. I don't want to be the center of attention, but to do that, I have to change every single thing about myself. Like this big grand house of God that you see behind me, what you see on the outside is not always necessarily what dwells within. House of Hope is a castle in a neighborhood of mansions. Everything up and down Summit Avenue is so grand and glorious that this church building sometimes doesn't even stand out. Whether looking at the outside structure or entering the sanctuary, I could see some people being turned off by this place. I can hear those people's words because I've heard them before. I am a simple, humble person. I want a personal relationship with Jesus that's not about the money. Grand places like this are for the arrogant and wealthy and self-righteous believers who think they can buy their way into heaven. Yeah, no judgment there. If you think this way, I want to invite you to take a different look. This congregation has a long and dynamic history of ministering to at-risk populations. When they celebrated their 150th anniversary, they raised $4.5 million to build affordable housing units for at-risk people. House of Hope partnered with Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative to build a 44-unit option for homeless youth in St. Paul. They also work to fight domestic abuse, child abuse, hunger, and homelessness. They are dedicated advocates for health care and seek to control gun violence. This work is not some empty message preached from some vaulted pulpit, but a mission woven into the hearts of the believers who listen. They have taken all that they have received, their time, their talents, their treasures, and have worked to build a better place. I wanted to from here to make this point. Don't let appearances fool you. I love this grand church for its humility, not for its perfection, but for its humility. It understands and lives Christ's words. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, but those who humble themselves will be exalted. I've been in 100 small, simple, plain sanctuaries where congregations love to shine a light on their humility, yet their mission never extends beyond the four walls of that sanctuary, and their focus never drifts far from the person that's sitting next to them in their humble house of worship. Humility is not an appearance, but an approach to life. It is an attitude one takes when they encounter and engage the world. Today's preaching point is this: to find joy in the chaos, we need an attitude of humility that recognizes we cannot solve or control the chaos in our life on our own. We need other people to help us. And nothing reveals the need for humility quite like this pandemic. This virus doesn't care about your age, your prosperity, your wealth, or your knowledge. It does not care about your political affiliation, opinion, or your theories about its origin. It is programmed to mutate, transfer, and destroy. Don't just look at the death totals as a point of reference of how strong it is. What makes this virus more difficult than any of the ones that came before it is it doesn't always kill. If it did kill, it would kill itself out. We cannot fight this battle on our own. Scientists desperately seeking to understand and find solutions, they need information. They need information even from their enemies. How you individually react to it impacts the people around you, both the people you know and the people you don't know. You need your enemy to help you as well as your friend. Maybe you're consumed with fear over this pandemic. For some, fear and frustration are becoming anger. For me, and not to minimize the seriousness of it all, I'm finding too many expressions of joy to be angry. because our neighbors are outside walking more than ever before, we're actually getting to know them. Our neighborhood was more a place of shelter in before the virus than after it. Nurses, doctors, EMTs, first responders are stepping up in amazing ways. But the truth is, they do this all the time. It's now only during this virus and this pandemic that we're seeing it. I'm witnessing every day average people stepping up to do amazing acts of compassion for others. But you want to know the truth? That also happens every single day. It's only now in the chaos that we're noticing it. It's only when our ability to be with each other has been taken away that we are truly appreciating the depth of the need for it. I mean, really seriously, even introverts are discovering how much they need others in their life, how much they need human community to survive. And when I see this, I want to say, as the song goes, my life moves on, an endless song. How can I keep from singing? In the Book of Joy, Archbishop Tutu says, "We are not created for independence and self-sufficiency, but for interdependence and mutual support. We are all born and all die in the same way, and at these moments, we are totally dependent on others. Whether you are a Dalai Lama or a beggar, whether you are Archbishop or a refugee. I want you to see your interdependence is not a point of weakness, but a source of strength. A strength that helps even the most wounded soul find joy even in the midst of crazy chaos. I pray that you adopt humility. I pray that you adopt an attitude of humility, especially in this time of isolation, because it will allow you to experience God's joy in the midst of the chaos of your life, whether there's a pandemic or not." Amen.